Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Colton Hayes drummed his calloused fingers on the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the modest two-story house he called home. The evening sun cast long shadows across the neatly trimmed lawn, a stark contrast to the turmoil churning in his gut. With a deep breath, he killed the engine of his weathered pickup truck and reached for the envelope on the passenger seat. 150 grand, he muttered, shaking his head. This better be the end of it. The weight of the envelope, filled with documents confirming the final payment of his mother-in-law's debt, felt like lead in his hand. Colton's jaw clenched as he remembered the countless overtime hours, the side jobs, the sacrifices he'd made to clear Arlene's name. All for family. All for Renee. As he stepped out of the truck, the cool Denver air nipped at his skin. Colton's work boots crunched on the gravel driveway, each step bringing him closer to what he hoped would be the beginning of a new chapter. No more debt, no more stress. Just him and Renee, building the life they'd always dreamed of. He paused at the front door, straightening his worn flannel shirt and running a hand through his short, dark hair. A flicker of movement caught his eye, the curtain in the living room twitching back into place. Colton's brow furrowed. Something felt off. The moment he stepped inside, the tension hit him like a physical force. Renee stood in the center of the living room, arms crossed, her usually warm brown eyes cold and distant. Beside her, perched on the edge of the sofa like a bird of prey, sat Arlene, her hawk-like gaze fixed on the envelope in Colton's hand. "You're late," Renee said, her voice flat. Colton's eyes narrowed. Traffic was bad, but I got the final payment. It's done, Arlene. You're debt-free. He held out the envelope, expecting what? Gratitude? Relief? Instead, Arlene snatched it from his hand, her red lacquered nails a stark contrast to the crisp white paper. "Well, it's about time," she sniffed, leafing through the documents. "I was beginning to think you'd never come through." Colton bit back a retort, turning instead to his wife. "Renee, honey, what's going on? I thought we'd celebrate tonight. This is a big deal for us." Renee's laugh was sharp, humorless. "Celebrate? Oh, Colton. Always so simple." The word hit him like a slap. Colton took a step back, studying his wife's face. The woman before him suddenly seemed like a stranger, all hard edges and cold disdain where there used to be warmth and love. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked, his voice low. Renee sighed, uncrossing her arms and reaching for a sleek leather handbag on the coffee table. "It means, Colton, that while you've been busy playing the hero, paying off Mom's debts, I've been making plans of my own." Colton's heart rate picked up, a sick feeling growing in the pit of his stomach. "What kind of plans?" "The kind that don't include you," Arlene chimed in, a smirk playing at the corners of her overly Botoxed lips. Renee shot her mother a glare before turning back to Colton. "I've met someone, Colton. Someone who can give me the life I've always wanted." "The life you? Well, you've tried, I'll give you that. But it's not enough. It's never been enough." The room seemed to tilt on its axis. Colton gripped the back of a chair, his knuckles turning white. "You're having an affair?" "Don't act so shocked," Renee said, rolling her eyes. "Did you really think I'd be content with this?" She gestured around the modest living room, her lip curling in disgust. The tiny house, the budget vacations, always scraping by. Colton's shock was quickly giving way to anger. "We built this life together, Renee. Everything I've done for us. For our future." "Well, my future is with Grant now," Renee snapped. "Grant Calloway. He's a corporate lawyer, Colton. Do you have any idea the kind of lifestyle he can provide?" The name hit Colton like a punch to the gut. Grant Calloway, he'd heard whispers about the man's less than ethical business practices. "You're leaving me for that snake?" Renee's eyes flashed. "That snake has more ambition in his little finger than you have in your entire body. He understands me, Colton. He knows what I need. And what about what I need?" Colton's voice rose, the hurt and betrayal bubbling over. "I've given everything for this family. I just paid off your mother's massive debt. For Christ's sake." Arlene cleared her throat. "Yes, well, consider the your parting gift, dear. A token of appreciation for services rendered." Colton whirled on her. "You knew about this? You let me pay off your debt, knowing Renee was planning to leave." Arlene shrugged, examining her manicure. "A mother always looks out for her daughter's best interests. And let's face it, Colton, you were never going to be enough for my Renee." The room fell silent, the weight of their words hanging in the air. Colton's mind raced, piecing together 1,000 little moments, the late nights at open houses, the new clothes, the sudden interest in high-end restaurants. He'd been blind, so focused on providing that he'd missed the signs of his crumbling marriage. "How long?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Renee hesitated, a flicker of something guilt, regret, crossing her face. 6 months. The betrayal cut deep, but Colton refused to let them see him break. He took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. When he spoke, his voice was eerily calm. "Then all of you need to leave." Renee blinked, clearly taken aback by his composure. "What?" "You heard me," Colton said, his eyes hard. "If you're choosing him, if this is really what you want, then get out. Both of you. Now." Arlene stood, her face a mask of indignation. "Now see here, Colton. You can't just I can, and I am." Colton cut her off. "This is my house. My name on the mortgage. You want to throw away our marriage for some rich lawyer? Fine, but you don't get to do it under my roof." Renee's smugness faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. "Colton, be reasonable. We need time to what?" Colton's laugh was bitter. "To pack up everything you want to take to your new life? To strip this place bare like you've stripped away every ounce of trust one had in you? No. You made your choice. Now live with it." He strode to the front door, yanking it open. "Get out." For a moment, neither woman moved. Then slowly Renee reached for her bag. "Fine," she said, her voice tight. "We'll go to Grant's. His parents have plenty of room." "Of course they do," Colton muttered. As Renee and Arlene gathered their things, an uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Colton stood by the door, arms crossed, watching as his wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, prepared to walk out of his life. Just before stepping over the threshold, Renee paused. "Colton, save it," he said, his voice cold. "I don't want to hear whatever justification you've cooked up. Just go." With a final, almost regretful glance, Renee walked out, Arlene close behind. As their heels clicked down the driveway, Colton slammed the door shut, the sound echoing through the now empty house. For a long moment, he stood there, forehead pressed against the cool wood of the door. Then, with a roar of anger and pain, he whirled around, his fist connecting with the framed photo of their wedding day hanging in the entryway. Glass shattered, raining down onto the hardwood floor. Colton barely noticed the sting of cuts on his knuckles as he plucked the photo from the broken frame. Renee's smiling face stared up at him, a lie frozen in time. "You think I'm weak?" he growled, crumpling the photo in his fist. "You think I'll just let this go? You have no idea who you've crossed." With newfound determination, Colton strode to his home office. He booted up his computer, pulling out files and documents related to Arlene's debt and his marriage to Renee. His mind, honed by years of managing complex construction projects, kicked into high gear. There had to be a way to turn this around, to make them pay for their betrayal. As he pored over financial records and legal agreements, a plan began to take shape in Colton's mind. Hours passed, the sky outside fading from twilight to inky blackness. Colton barely noticed, his focus laser-sharp as he pieced together the puzzle of his revenge. It was nearly dawn when he finally leaned back in his chair, a grim smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Got you," he muttered, staring at the screen before him. There, buried in the fine print of the loan agreement he'd signed to cover Arlene's debt, was a salvation clause that would nullify the entire payment if Renee violated their marital contract. Colton's eyes gleamed with a mix of triumph and barely contained rage. They thought they had won, thought they could discard him like yesterday's trash. But they had underestimated him. Gravely, as the first rays of sunlight began to creep through the blinds, Colton Hayes made a solemn vow to himself. He would not rest until justice was served, until Renee, Arlene, and this Grant Calloway felt the full weight of their actions. Let them think they had broken him. Let them believe he was defeated. Colton would play the part of the wronged, passive husband for now. But behind the scenes, he would be meticulously crafting their downfall. With renewed purpose, Colton began to gather evidence of Renee's affair. Phone records, credit card statements, social media activity, anything that could prove the violation of their marital contract. His years in construction had taught him the value of attention to detail, and now he applied that skill with ruthless efficiency. Days turned into weeks. Colton threw himself into his work, presenting a facade of a man struggling to cope with the end of his marriage. But beneath the surface, he was a man possessed, driven by a singular goal. It was at a mutual friend's barbecue that he first came face-to-face with Renee since that fateful night. She was radiant, hanging on the arm of a tall, polished man Colton assumed must be Grant Calloway. Steeling himself, Colton approached the couple, plastering on a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Renee," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "You're looking well." Renee started, clearly caught off guard by his presence. "Colton, I didn't expect to see you here." "Clearly," Colton replied dryly. He turned to Grant, extending a hand. "And you must be the famous Grant Calloway. I've heard so much about you." Grant's handshake was firm, his smile oily. "Likewise, Colton. I hope there are no hard feelings between us. These things, well, they happen, don't they?" It took every ounce of Colton's self-control not to deck the smug bastard right there. Instead, he shrugged, affecting an air of resigned acceptance. "You're right, they do happen," he said. "I just hope you two are happy together. That's all I ever wanted for Renee." He saw a flicker of surprise, and was that guilt? In Renee's eyes. Good. Let her think he was taking the high road. It would only make his eventual revenge that much sweeter. As he turned to walk away, Colton paused, looking back at Renee. "Oh, and Renee? I'm sorry." "Sorry," she echoed, confusion evident in her voice. Colton nodded solemnly. "For whatever I did to make you unhappy. For not being enough. I hope you find what you're looking for with Grant." With that, he walked away, leaving a stunned Renee in his wake. As soon as he was out of sight, Colton's facade crumbled, his hands balling into fists at his sides. The encounter had been a necessary strategic move to lull them into a false sense of security. But it had cost him, reopening wounds that were far from healed. That night, as he sat alone in his empty house, Colton redoubled his efforts. He dug deeper into Grant Calloway's background, leveraging contacts and calling in favors to uncover the man's secrets. What he found made his blood run cold. Grant Calloway, it seemed, was no stranger to fraud. Using his parents' connections and reputation as a shield, he had been involved in a series of shady real estate deals and investment schemes. Colton's construction background gave him unique insight into the world of property development, and he could see the web of lies and deceit Grant had woven. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, Colton felt a surge of dark satisfaction. Grant hadn't just stolen his wife. He had also unwittingly handed Colton the key to his own destruction. But Colton knew he couldn't rush this. Revenge, like the best construction projects, required careful planning and flawless execution. He would bide his time, gathering more evidence, building an ironclad case that would bring Grant Calloway's carefully constructed world crashing down around him. And when the dust settled, Renee and Arlene would find themselves right back where they started or worse. The thought brought a grim smile to Colton's face as he stared out the window at the twinkling lights of Denver in the distance. "You wanted to play games," he murmured, his reflection hard and determined in the glass. "Well, game on. And this time, I'm playing for keeps." The glow of the computer screen cast harsh shadows across Colton's face as he hunched over his desk, poring through financial records. Months had passed since Renee's betrayal, but his resolve hadn't wavered. If anything, it had hardened into an unbreakable determination. A knock at the door broke his concentration. Colton glanced at the clock at 10:30 p.m. Who could be calling this late? He approached the door cautiously, peering through the peephole. His jaw clenched at the sight of the visitor. Yanking the door open, Colton fixed a steely gaze on Arlene. "What do you want?" Arlene flinched at his tone, but quickly regained her composure. Now, Colton. Is that any way to greet family?" "Family?" Colton scoffed. "You lost the right to call yourself that when you helped Renee stab me in the back." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," Arlene said, waving a dismissive hand. "May I come in? It's rather chilly out here." Colton stood firm, blocking the entrance. "Say what you came to say, and leave." Arlene's facade cracked slightly, revealing a hint of desperation. It's about the debt, Colton. The one you paid off. What about it?" "Well, you see," Arlene stammered, "there's been a bit of a complication. The creditors, they're saying the debt wasn't fully cleared. They're threatening legal action." Colton's eyes narrowed. "And how exactly is that my problem?" "Come now, Colton," Arlene pleaded, her voice taking on a wheedling tone. "You've always been so good to us. Surely you can help out one last time?" For a moment, Colton said nothing, his face an unreadable mask. Then, slowly, a cold smile spread across his features. "You've got some nerve, Arlene. You helped destroy my marriage, and now you have the audacity to ask for more money." Arlene's eyes widened. "But Colton," "I know," Colton cut her off, his voice sharp as a blade. "You made your choice. You and Renee both. Now you get to live with the consequences. But what about family?" Arlene protested weakly. Colton leaned in close, his words barely above a whisper. My family betrayed me. As far as I'm concerned, I don't have a family anymore. With that, he slammed the door in Arlene's face, ignoring her continued pleas. As he walked back to his office, a grim satisfaction settled over him. Everything was falling into place. The next morning, Colton found himself at his favorite diner, nursing a cup of black coffee. He'd been coming here more often lately, finding comfort in the familiar surroundings and the lack of pitying looks from the staff. Well, if it isn't the man of the hour, a voice drawled from behind him. Colton turned to see Grant Calloway sliding into the booth across from him, that infuriating smirk plastered on his face. Calloway, Colton acknowledged coldly. To what do I owe the displeasure? Grant chuckled, signaling the waitress for coffee. Come now, Colton. I thought we could have a civilized conversation. Man to man. About what? Colton asked, his voice flat. About Renee, of course, Grant replied, leaning back in his seat. And about how we can all move forward amicably. Colton's grip on his mug tightened. Amicably? You steal my wife, and you want to be friends. Grant's smile never wavered. Steal is such an ugly word. Renee made her choice, Colton. I'm just here to make sure there are no lingering issues. What's that supposed to mean? Grant leaned forward, his voice low. It means, Colton, that it would be in everyone's best interest if you simply let go. Move on. Stop digging into things that don't concern you anymore. Colton's eyes narrowed. And if I don't? Well, Grant said, his tone casual but his eyes hard. Let's just say things could get unpleasant. For everyone involved, for a long moment, the two men stared at each other, the tension palpable. Then slowly Colton stood up. Thanks for the chat, Calloway, he said, his voice deceptively calm. But I think we're done here. As he walked away, Colton could feel Grant's eyes boring into his back. Good. Let him think he'd made his point. Little did Grant know, he'd just confirmed everything Colton had suspected. Back at home, Colton threw himself into his research with renewed vigor. Grant's veiled threat had only strengthened his resolve. He was close to something big. He could feel it. As he combed through financial records and property deeds, a pattern began to emerge. Grant wasn't just involved in a few shady deals. He was at the center of a complex web of fraud and deceit, using his parents' reputation and connections to cover his tracks. Colton's phone buzzed, startling him out of his focused state. An unknown number flashed on the screen. Hello, he answered cautiously. Is this Colton Hayes? A woman's voice asked. Who's asking? My name is Lydia Calloway, the voice replied. I believe we have a mutual interest to discuss. Colton's breath caught in his throat. Calloway, could this be? I'm listening, he said carefully. Not over the phone, Lydia insisted. Can you meet me? There's a coffee shop on 5th and Main. In an hour. Colton hesitated, weighing his options. This could be a trap, but it could also be the break he'd been waiting for. I'll be there, he said finally. An hour later, Colton sat in a corner booth of the bustling coffee shop, scanning the crowd. A woman in her mid-30s approached, her bearing confident, but her eyes wary. Colton Hayes, she asked, sliding into the seat across from him. Colton nodded. Lydia Calloway, I presume. Lydia's lips quirked in a humorless smile. Grant's a strange sister at your service. And why exactly are you reaching out to me? Colton asked, his guard up. Lydia leaned forward, her voice low. Because I know what my brother's been up to, and I want to see him pay for it. Colton's eyes narrowed. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't, Lydia replied bluntly. But I have information you need, and you have the motivation to use it. For the next hour, Lydia laid out a damning picture of Grant's activities. As a financial analyst, she had access to information that had eluded even Colton's thorough investigation. He's using our parents, Lydia explained, disgust evident in her voice. They think they're investing in legitimate business ventures, but Grant's funneling the money into his own schemes. Colton absorbed the information, his mind racing. And Renee? What's her role in all this? Lydia's expression hardened. Your ex-wife? She's in it up to her neck. Grant's using her real estate connections to facilitate some of his shadier deals. The confirmation hit Colton like a physical blow. He'd suspected Renee's involvement, but hearing it laid out so plainly. Why are you telling me all this? He asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. Lydia's eyes met his, filled with a mix of determination and regret. Because someone needs to stop him. And you, Colton Hayes, have more reason than anyone to want to see my brother fall. As Colton left the coffee shop, his head spinning with the new information, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had the pieces now. All he needed to do was put them together. Over the next few weeks, Colton worked tirelessly, corroborating Lydia's information with his own findings. He built a meticulous case, documenting every fraudulent deal, every manipulated contract. It was during this time that he received an unexpected visitor. The doorbell rang one Saturday afternoon, and Colton opened it to find Renee standing on his porch, looking uncomfortable. "Renee," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "What brings you here?" She fidgeted with her purse strap, avoiding his gaze. I needed to talk to you, Colton. Can I come in?" Against his better judgment, Colton stepped aside, allowing her to enter. They stood awkwardly in the living room, the ghost of their shared past hanging heavy in the air. "Well?" Colton prompted when Renee remained silent. She took a deep breath. "I made a mistake, Colton. Leaving you. It wasn't what I thought it would be." Colton's jaw clenched. "And what exactly did you think it would be, Renee?" "I don't know," she exclaimed, throwing up her hands. "Exciting? Glamorous? But Grant, he's not who I thought he was. And who did you think he was?" Colton asked, his voice hard. "A knight in shining armor. Come to rescue you from your boring life with me." Renee flinched at his tone. "That's not fair, Colton." Fair," Colton interrupted, his carefully maintained composure cracking. "You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you threw away our marriage for a man you barely knew? Was it fair when you let me pay off your mother's debt, knowing you were planning to leave?" Tears welled up in Renee's eyes. "I'm sorry, Colton. I know I hurt you. But I'm here now, try to make things right." For a moment, Colton allowed himself to remember the woman he'd fallen in love with, the life they'd planned together. But that woman was gone, replaced by the stranger standing before him. "It's too late for that, Renee," he said quietly. "Whatever we had, it's gone. You made sure of that. But can't we try?" Renee pleaded, reaching for his hand. "For old time's sake?" Colton pulled away, his expression hardening. "Old times? The old times are dead, Renee. You killed them, and now you have to live with that choice." Renee's face crumpled. "Colton, please. I think you should leave," Colton said, his voice firm. "Whatever you came here hoping for, you're not going to find it." As he closed the door behind a sobbing Renee, Colton felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had faced his past and come out stronger. Now it was time to focus on the future and on bringing down those who had wronged him. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place a week later. Lydia called with information about a major deal Grant was planning, one that would cement his fraudulent empire and potentially ruin countless innocent investors. "It's happening next Friday," Lydia explained, her voice tense. "If we're going to act, it has to be before then." Colton nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "I'm ready. Let's end this." With Lydia's insider knowledge and Colton's meticulously gathered evidence, they crafted a plan. Colton would confront Grant, Renee, and the others involved, laying out the extent of their crimes and giving them one chance to come clean. As the day of reckoning approached, Colton felt a calm settle over him. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. About making sure that those who thought they were above the law faced the consequences of their actions. The night before the confrontation, Colton stood in front of the mirror, straightening his tie. The man who looked back at him was different from the one who had stood in this same spot months ago, reeling from betrayal. This man was stronger, wiser, and unafraid. "Time to finish this," Colton muttered to his reflection. He picked up his phone, sending out the carefully worded invitations he'd prepared. To Renee, to Arlene, to Grant and his parents. All summoned to Colton's house under the guise of finalizing divorce proceedings and debt settlements. Little did they know, they were walking into a reckoning of their own making. As Colton made his final preparations, he allowed himself a small, grim smile. Tomorrow, everything would change, and he would be the one holding all the cards. The morning sun cast long shadows across Colton's living room as he meticulously arranged the chairs. Each seat represented a player in this elaborate game of deceit and betrayal. Now it was time for the final move. A sharp knock at the door signaled the arrival of his guests. Colton took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. He opened the door to find Renee and Arlene standing there, both looking uncomfortable. "Come in," Colton said, his voice neutral. "The others should be here soon." Renee stepped inside, her eyes darting around the room. "Colton, what's this all about?" "Your message was vague." "All in good time," Colton replied, gesturing to the chairs. "Please have a seat." As they settled in, another knock announced the arrival of Grant and his parents, Richard and Marjorie Calloway. Grant's confident swagger faltered slightly as he took in the scene. Well, this is cozy, Grant said, his tone forcefully light. A little reunion, is it? Colton's eyes met Grant's, a silent challenge passing between them. Something like that. Why don't you all make yourselves comfortable? Once everyone was seated, an uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Colton remained standing, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp. I'm sure you're all wondering why I've called you here, Colton began, his voice steady. Arlene shifted in her seat. You mentioned something about finalizing the divorce and debt settlements? Did I? Colton's lips quirked in a humorless smile. Well, I suppose that's partially true. We are here to settle some debts, just not the kind you're thinking of. Grant leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. What are you playing at, Hayes? Colton picked up a thick folder from the side table. I'm not playing at anything, Calloway. In fact, I'd say the games are over. He opened the folder, pulling out a stack of documents. For months, I've been gathering evidence. Financial records, property deeds, bank statements. It's amazing what you can find when you start digging. Renee's face paled. Colton, what are you talking about? I'm talking about fraud, Renee. Colton said, his voice hard. Massive systematic fraud. And guess what? You're all implicated. Grant shot to his feet. This is ridiculous. You can't just sit down, Grant, Colton commanded, his tone brooking no argument. Surprisingly, Grant complied, sinking back into his chair. Colton turned to Richard and Marjorie Calloway. Mr. and Mrs. Calloway, did you know that your son has been using your reputation and connections to facilitate fraudulent real estate deals? Richard's face reddened. What? Grant, what is he talking about? Before Grant could respond, Colton continued. He's been manipulating property values, creating shell companies, and funneling money through various schemes. And he's been using your investments to do it. Marjorie gasped. Grant, tell me this isn't true. Grant's composure cracked. Mom, Dad, I can explain. Oh, I'm sure you can, Colton interrupted. Just like I'm sure Renee can explain her role in all this. All eyes turned to Renee, who looked like she might be sick. I didn't know, she stammered. Grant told me it was all legitimate. Colton's laugh was bitter. Come on, Renee. You're smarter than that. Or at least, I thought you were. He pulled out another document. This is a record of all the properties you helped flip for Grant. Funny how they all seem to be owned by the same shell companies, isn't it? Arlene stood up, her face a mask of indignation. Now see here, Colton. You can't just accuse people without proof. Colton cut her off. Oh, I have proof, Arlene. More than enough to bury all of you. He turned back to the Calloways. Your son has been lying to you, using your money and your name to build his little empire of sand. And when it all comes crashing down, which it will, you'll be left holding the bag. Richard Calloway's face had gone from red to ashen. Grant, is this true? Have you been stealing from us? Grant's cool demeanor had completely evaporated. Dad, I can fix this. I just need a little more time. Time? Colton scoffed. Time for what, Grant? To dig yourself in deeper? To drag more innocent people into your schemes? He turned to address the room at large. I've spent months putting this all together. Every fraudulent deal, every manipulated contract, every cent that's been misappropriated. It's all here. Colton held up a USB drive, and it's all ready to be sent to the SEC, the FBI, and every major news outlet in the country. The room erupted into chaos. Grant lunged for the USB drive, but Colton easily sidestepped him. Renee burst into tears, while Arlene shouted accusations. The Calloways sat in stunned silence, the weight of the revelations crushing down on them. Enough! Colton's voice cut through the noise, silencing everyone. Sit down. All of you. Reluctantly, they complied. Colton looked at each of them in turn, his gaze unflinching. Here's what's going to happen, he said, his voice low and intense. Grant, you're going to confess everything to your parents and to the authorities. You're going to make restitution to everyone you've defrauded, including your own family. Grant's face twisted with rage. And why the hell would I do that? Colton's smile was cold. Because if you don't, I'll release everything I have. Your career will be over, your reputation destroyed. You'll spend the next decade in a federal prison, if you're lucky. He turned to Renee and Arlene. As for you two, Renee, you're going to resign from your real estate firm and come clean about your involvement in Grant's schemes. Renee's eyes widened in panic. But my career is the least of what you should be worried about. Colton finished for her. And Arlene, that debt you so conveniently forgot about? It's coming back to haunt you. Arlene's face paled. What do you mean? Colton pulled out another document. Remember that clause in the loan agreement? The one that said the payment would be nullified if Renee violated our marital contract? Well, guess what? Adultery counts as a violation. He slapped the paper down on the table. The entire $150,000 is back in your name, Arlene. With interest. Arlene slumped in her chair, the fight going out of her. But I can't pay that. I don't have the money. Not my problem, Colton said coldly. You should have thought of that before you helped destroy my marriage. He turned back to the group at large. You all have a choice to make. Come clean, face the consequences of your actions, and try to make things right. Or I release everything and watch your worlds burn. The room fell silent as the weight of Colton's words sank in. Grant was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. You're bluffing, he said, but there was no conviction in his tone. You wouldn't really, Colton cut him off. Wouldn't I? You took everything from me, Grant. My wife, my trust, my future. Did you really think I'd just roll over and take it? He leaned in close, his voice low and dangerous. I'm not bluffing. This ends today, one way or another. The only question is how much damage you're willing to take with you. Richard Calloway cleared his throat, his voice shaky. Grant, son, is what he's saying true? Have you really been? Grant's shoulders slumped in defeat. Dad, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. I thought I could fix it, make it all work out. Marjorie let out a choked sob. Oh, Grant, what have you done? Colton watched the scene unfold, feeling a grim satisfaction. He turned to Renee, who was staring at him with a mixture of fear and awe. Colton, she said softly. I'm so sorry. I never knew it would come to this. For a moment, Colton allowed himself to remember the woman he'd loved, the life they'd planned together. But that woman was gone, replaced by the stranger before him. Save it, Renee, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Your apologies mean nothing to me now. Arlene, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. You can't do this, Colton. We're family. Colton's laugh was hollow. Family? You lost the right to call yourself that when you helped Renee stab me in the back. You made your choices, Arlene. Now you get to live with them. He addressed the room once more. You have 24 hours to start making things right. Grant, you'll turn yourself into the authorities. Renee, you'll resign from your firm and provide a full statement about your involvement. Arlene, you'll make arrangements to repay the debt. Grant's eyes flashed with a last spark of defiance. And if we don't? Colton's smile was cold. Then I push this button, he said, holding up his phone, and everything goes public. Your careers, your reputations, your freedom, it all goes up in smoke. He walked to the front door, opening it. You all know the way out? I suggest you use the next 24 hours wisely. One by one, they filed out, each lost in their own thoughts. Grant paused at the threshold, turning back to Colton. You know, Grant said, a hint of his old arrogance creeping back into his voice. For someone who claims to be better than us, you've turned out to be quite the vindictive bastard. Colton met his gaze unflinchingly. The difference, Grant, is that I'm not doing this for personal gain. I'm doing it because it's right. Because actions have consequences, and it's time you all faced yours. With that, he closed the door, shutting out Grant and the others. For a long moment, Colton stood there, feeling the weight of what he'd done settling over him. He walked to the window, watching as Grant and the others drove away. A part of him, a small, wounded part, wanted to feel satisfaction at their distress. But all he felt was a quiet resolve. Justice, he realized, didn't always feel good, but it was necessary. His phone buzzed with a text from Lydia. Is it done? Colton typed back a simple reply, yes. It's over. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across his living room, Colton allowed himself a moment of reflection. He thought about the man he'd been when this all started, trusting, perhaps naive, but fundamentally good. Had that man survived the crucible of betrayal and vengeance? He wasn't sure, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would never allow himself to be a victim again. Colton walked to his home office, where the evidence of his months-long investigation was spread out across his desk. Carefully, methodically, he began to pack it all away. Not to hide it, he meant what he'd said about going public if they didn't comply, but to close this chapter of his life. As he worked, his mind drifted to the future. The construction company he'd been neglecting in his pursuit of justice now called for his attention. There were projects to oversee, teams to lead, a life to rebuild. It wouldn't be easy. The wounds inflicted by Renee's betrayal and Grant's machinations would take time to heal. But Colton was nothing if not resilient. He had weathered this storm, and he had come out stronger for it. The next morning, as Colton prepared to head to his first job site in weeks, his phone buzzed with a series of notifications. News alerts, text messages, even a voicemail from his lawyer. He didn't need to read them to know what they said. Grant had turned himself in. Renee had resigned. Arlene was frantically trying to secure a loan to repay her debt. It was over. As Colton got into his truck, he caught sight of his reflection in the rearview mirror. The man looking back at him was older, harder, but unbroken. He allowed himself a small, grim smile. Time to build something new, he muttered to himself, starting the engine. As he pulled out of his driveway, leaving behind the house that had once been a symbol of his shattered dreams, Colton felt a sense of liberation. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was his to shape. And this time, he would build it on a foundation of strength, wisdom, and an unshakable determination to never again be anyone's fool. The Denver skyline loomed in the distance, a reminder of the world that lay beyond his personal drama. Colton Hayes drove towards it, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. He had survived betrayal, enacted justice, and reclaimed his life. Now it was time to look forward, to build, to grow. And if anyone dared to cross him again, well, they'd learn the hard way that Colton Hayes was not a man to be underestimated. As he merged onto the highway, leaving behind the neighborhood that had witnessed his downfall and resurrection, Colton allowed himself one last thought of Renee, Grant, and the others. Game over, he said to the empty car, his voice tinged with finality. Then he turned up the radio, focused his eyes on the road ahead, and drove towards his future, a future he would build on his own terms, unburdened by the weight of betrayal and strengthened by the knowledge that he had faced the worst and come out on top. The story of Colton Hayes, the man who refused to be broken, was far from over. But this chapter, the chapter of revenge and reckoning, had come to a close. And as Denver's towers grew larger on the horizon, Colton knew that whatever came next, he was ready for it.